In the long story of humanity, there are moments when history quietly changes direction. No great battle, no collapsing empire, no dramatic proclamation. Just a silent force moving from one body to another, from one city to the next. In the year 165 CE, at the height of Roman power, such a force began to spread across the ancient world. It did not carry a banner or a sword. It carried something far more powerful: disease. The Roman Empire was the most connected civilization the world had ever seen. Roads stretched for thousands of kilometers. Ships carried goods across vast seas. Soldiers marched between continents. Markets overflowed with people, animals, spices, and trade from distant lands. Yet within this extraordinary network of human achievement, an invisible traveler found the perfect path. A microscopic organism began moving silently through the arteries of an empire. What followed would become one of the first truly documented pandemics in human history. Cities that once thrived with life began to fill with fear. Entire communities fell ill. Soldiers collapsed in their barracks. Families watched helplessly as fever, pain, and strange eruptions spread across the skin of the infected. The Roman world had faced wars, rebellions, and political crises before, but it had never faced an enemy like this. Ancient physicians tried to understand what they were witnessing. Among them was one of the greatest medical minds of antiquity, the physician Galen. Through careful observation, he recorded the terrifying symptoms of this mysterious illness. His descriptions would travel through time, becoming one of the earliest medical testimonies of a pandemic. Yet even Galen could not see the true culprit. The real enemy was too small for any ancient eye to observe. Today, historians and scientists call this catastrophe the Antonine Plague. It would sweep across the Roman Empire for more than a decade, killing millions and reshaping the course of history. But this is not only the story of an ancient disease. It is the story of how humans, animals, trade, and empire became connected in ways that allowed a microscopic organism to challenge the greatest power of its age. In the 2nd century of the Common Era, the Roman Empire stood at the height of its power. Its borders stretched across 3 continents, from the misty forests of Britannia to the deserts of North Africa, and from the Atlantic Ocean to the distant frontiers of the Near East. Nearly 70 million people lived under Roman rule. Cities flourished with trade, philosophy, engineering, and culture. Massive roads connected provinces like veins, carrying the lifeblood of an empire. To those who lived within its borders, Rome seemed eternal. Roman legions marched with unmatched discipline, protecting the vast territories of the empire. Merchant ships crossed the Mediterranean every day, carrying grain, wine, olive oil, spices, silk, and animals from distant lands. Markets were filled with voices speaking many languages. Soldiers returned from campaigns in foreign lands. Traders traveled thousands of kilometers along ancient routes that connected Rome to Africa, Arabia, India, and even the mysterious kingdoms of the Far East. Never before had the ancient world been so interconnected. At the center of this immense empire ruled Emperor Marcus Aurelius, a philosopher on the throne. Known for his wisdom and his reflections on duty and humanity, he governed during what historians would later call the final years of Rome's golden age. Stability, prosperity, and military strength defined the empire. To most Romans, the future seemed secure. Yet history often hides its greatest turning points behind moments of calm. Somewhere far beyond the marble temples of Rome and the fortified camps of its legions, something unseen had already begun its journey. It traveled without armies, without ships, and without banners. It moved quietly through breath, touch, and human contact. Invisible to the eyes of ancient physicians, a microscopic enemy was preparing to cross the roads, ports, and cities of the Roman world. Within a few years, it would bring fear to the greatest empire on earth. The Roman Empire had conquered kingdoms, defeated armies, and ruled millions, but it had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that could travel silently within the very people who carried the empire forward. An enemy that required no strategy, no weapons, and no battlefield. The Roman Empire conquered continents, but it could not conquer a virus. In the 2nd century CE, the Roman Empire was home to one of the largest populations the ancient world had ever seen. Historians estimate that nearly 70 to 75 million people lived under Roman rule. From the crowded streets of Rome itself, a city that may have held more than 1 million inhabitants, to the distant provincial towns scattered across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, human life was densely concentrated in ways rarely seen before in history. The empire was not just vast, it was intensely alive. Roman cities were marvels of engineering and urban design. Aqueducts carried fresh water across mountains and valleys. Public baths welcomed thousands every day, and massive sewer systems, such as the famous Cloaca Maxima, drained waste from the city streets. Yet beneath this impressive infrastructure, daily life was far less hygienic than it appeared. Waste often flowed through open gutters. Crowded apartment blocks packed families together in tight quarters. Markets were filled with food, animals, and refuse, all mixing within the same confined spaces. In these bustling environments, disease could move quietly from one person to another without anyone understanding why. Animals were everywhere in the Roman world. Horses carried soldiers and messengers across imperial roads. Oxen and donkeys pulled carts loaded with grain and goods. Sheep and goats moved through rural landscapes, providing wool, milk, and meat. Pigs wandered through city streets, feeding on scraps and refuse. In marketplaces and farms alike, humans and animals lived side by side, often sharing the same water sources and living spaces. The boundaries between human environments and animal environments were almost non-existent. Trade expanded this web of interaction even further. Animals were transported across long distances to supply armies and cities. Exotic species arrived from distant provinces, camels from Arabia, elephants from Africa, and rare animals destined for the arenas of Rome. Along the empire's vast trade routes, merchants, soldiers, livestock, and goods moved constantly between regions. Every caravan, every ship, and every marching legion created new pathways connecting distant ecosystems. To the Romans, this network represented power, prosperity, and civilization. But from the perspective of disease, it was something else entirely. The roads that allowed armies to move quickly could also carry infection. The ships that delivered grain to crowded cities could also deliver microscopic passengers. The same system that made Rome the most powerful empire in the ancient world also created the perfect network for a deadly epidemic to spread across continents. In the year 165 CE, far from the marble forums of Rome, the Roman Empire was fighting a war in the east. Roman legions had marched deep into the territories of the Parthian Empire, one of Rome's greatest rivals. After months of conflict, Roman forces captured the wealthy city of Seleucia, located along the banks of the Tigris River in what is now modern-day Iraq. It was a moment of military triumph. Yet, according to several ancient accounts, something far more dangerous than an enemy army was already present inside the city walls. Soon after the siege, Roman soldiers began to fall ill. What started as a few mysterious cases quickly turned into a spreading sickness within the ranks of the army. Fever, weakness, and strange eruptions on the skin appeared among the troops. Soldiers who had survived brutal battles suddenly found themselves facing an invisible enemy they could not fight with shields or swords. When the campaign ended, these same soldiers began the long journey back home, unknowingly carrying the disease with them. The Roman military machine was one of the most efficient logistical systems in the ancient world. Legions moved rapidly along well-built roads, passing through towns, forts, and major cities. Wherever the soldiers stopped, they interacted with civilians, merchants, and local communities. If disease had indeed begun among the troops in the East, the returning armies would have become powerful carriers of infection, transporting the illness thousands of kilometers across the empire. Modern historians and epidemiologists believe the disease may have traveled even farther before reaching the Roman army. Some theories suggest that the pathogen could have originated somewhere in Central Asia or possibly even in regions connected to ancient China. Through the vast commercial arteries of the Silk Road, merchants, animals, and goods moved continuously between East and West. Along these routes, diseases could travel silently across continents long before anyone understood the nature of infection. If this theory is correct, the Antonine Plague may represent one of the earliest examples of a truly globalized pandemic. A microscopic organism may have traveled thousands of kilometers across deserts, mountains, and trading routes before finally entering the Roman world through the movements of war and commerce. What began as a distant and invisible event in another part of the world was about to transform the destiny of the most powerful empire of its time. Among the many witnesses to this mysterious catastrophe was a physician whose name would echo through the history of medicine for nearly 2,000 years. His name was Galen. Born in the Greek city of Pergamon in Asia Minor, Galen would become one of the most influential medical thinkers of the ancient world. By the time the Antonine Plague began to spread, he was already known as a brilliant physician serving elite Roman families and even members of the imperial court. In a time when the causes of disease were still wrapped in superstition and philosophy, Galen relied on careful observation, logic, and documentation. When the epidemic reached the Roman world, Galen found himself observing symptoms unlike anything most physicians had seen before. Patients developed sudden high fevers that weakened the body within days. The throat often became painfully swollen, making it difficult to swallow or breathe. Severe vomiting and diarrhea drained the strength of the sick, leaving them exhausted and dehydrated. What made the illness even more frightening was what appeared on the skin. Strange eruptions began to form across the body, spreading like a rash that transformed into dark, crusted lesions. Galen carefully recorded these symptoms in his medical writings, describing the progression of the disease in remarkable detail. He noted how the eruptions often appeared around the 9th day of illness, sometimes forming pustules that would eventually dry and leave scars on survivors. In some patients, the disease passed after several weeks. In others, it proved fatal. Although Galen did not know it at the time, his notes would later become one of the earliest clinical descriptions of a pandemic disease in human history. Today, modern scientists examining Galen's descriptions believe the symptoms strongly resemble those of smallpox. The combination of high fever, gastrointestinal distress, and the appearance of pustular skin lesions closely matches what we know about the smallpox virus. While absolute certainty is impossible, after nearly 2,000 years, many historians and epidemiologists consider the Antonine Plague one of the earliest recorded outbreaks of smallpox in the Western world. Through the writings of Galen, the Antonine Plague became more than a historical rumor or a legend. It became a documented medical event. His observations represent one of the earliest attempts in human history to understand an epidemic through systematic observation rather than myth or fear. In many ways, Galen was witnessing the birth of epidemiology, the science that would one day allow humanity to study, track, and eventually fight the spread of disease. For nearly 2,000 years, historians and scientists have asked the same haunting question. What exactly was the disease that devastated the Roman Empire during the Antonine Plague? Ancient writers described terrifying symptoms, cities overwhelmed by death, and survivors permanently marked by the illness. Yet without microscopes, laboratories, or modern medical knowledge, the physicians of the Roman world could only observe and record what they saw. Today, scholars must reconstruct the identity of the disease using fragments of historical descriptions, archaeological evidence, and modern epidemiology. One possible explanation is measles, a highly contagious viral disease that spreads rapidly in large populations with little immunity. Measles can cause fever, coughing, weakness, and skin rashes that spread across the body. In societies encountering the virus for the first time, the disease can be extremely deadly. Some historians believe the Roman Empire, with its dense cities and enormous population, could have provided the perfect environment for a massive measles outbreak. Another theory suggests typhus, a disease spread by lice that often appears in crowded conditions, such as military camps and cities during times of war. Typhus can produce high fever, delirium, and rashes on the skin. Because Roman soldiers returning from the Eastern Campaign were among the first recorded victims, some researchers have proposed that typhus could have spread rapidly through the army before reaching civilian populations. However, many key symptoms described by ancient physicians do not perfectly match typhus infections. For many modern scientists, the strongest candidate remains smallpox. Galen's descriptions of painful pustules appearing across the body strongly resemble the distinctive lesions caused by the smallpox virus. Survivors of the Antonine Plague were often left with permanent scars, another hallmark of smallpox infection. Even more telling is the evidence that those who survived the disease rarely became infected again, suggesting the development of long-term immunity, a characteristic strongly associated with smallpox. Although absolute certainty may never be possible, the evidence increasingly points towards smallpox as the likely culprit behind the Antonine Plague. If this conclusion is correct, the Roman Empire may have been facing one of the earliest recorded smallpox pandemics in human history. A microscopic virus, invisible to the people of the ancient world, may have quietly altered the course of an empire, and perhaps the course of history itself. The Roman Empire possessed one of the most advanced transportation networks the ancient world had ever created. More than 400,000 kilometers of roads connected cities, military outposts, and distant provinces. These roads were built for speed and efficiency, allowing Roman legions, merchants, and officials to travel across vast distances with remarkable reliability. What the Romans could not have imagined, however, was that these same roads would one day serve another traveler disease. As Roman soldiers returned from the Eastern Campaign, they traveled through Anatolia, stopping in towns and military forts along the way. In these settlements, soldiers rested, traded, and interacted with local populations. If the disease had already taken hold among the troops, every stop along the journey became a new opportunity for infection to spread. What began as an outbreak within an army slowly transformed into a civilian epidemic moving across entire regions. From Anatolia, the disease likely moved westward through the Balkans and into the Italian peninsula. Merchant caravans, traveling officials, and grain shipments connected these regions in a constant flow of movement. Ships crossing the Mediterranean carried not only cargo, but also infected passengers. Ports that once symbolized prosperity, bustling with sailors, traders, animals, and laborers, suddenly became gateways for the silent spread of illness. Once the disease reached the city of Rome, the consequences became devastating. The capital of the empire was one of the most densely populated cities on earth. Crowded housing, busy markets, and constant movement of people created the perfect conditions for an epidemic to explode. Ancient sources suggest that at the height of the outbreak, as many as 2,000 people may have died each day in the city of Rome alone. From Italy, the pandemic continued its relentless journey across the western provinces of the empire. It spread into Gaul, the region that includes much of modern France, and eventually reached the distant frontier of Britannia. Within only a few years, the disease had traveled thousands of kilometers, touching nearly every corner of Roman territory. The very systems that made Rome powerful Its roads, armies, trade networks, and ports had unknowingly become the highways of a pandemic. As the disease spread across the Roman world, the true face of the pandemic began to reveal itself, not in military reports or political records, but in the daily lives of ordinary people. Roman cities, once vibrant centers of commerce and culture, slowly transformed into places of fear and uncertainty. Crowded streets that had once echoed with the voices of merchants and travelers now carried whispers of sickness. Families began to notice the same terrifying pattern appearing in house after house. Someone would fall ill with a sudden fever, and within days the entire household could be infected. The ancient world had no hospitals in the modern sense. There were physicians, healers, and temples where people sought divine help, but organized medical care for large populations simply did not exist. Most victims remained in their homes, surrounded by family members who could do little more than offer water, comfort, and prayers. As the illness progressed, the fever grew intense, draining the body of strength. Thirst became unbearable, and the sick struggled to survive through days of weakness and delirium. Soon the most disturbing signs began to appear. Dark eruptions spread across the skin, small lesions that gradually swelled into painful pustules. These marks covered the face, arms, chest, and back of the infected. For some, the illness lasted nearly 2 weeks, a brutal battle between the human body and an invisible enemy. Those who survived often emerged weakened and exhausted, having endured days of suffering that pushed the limits of human endurance. Yet survival often came with a permanent reminder. Many of those who recovered carried scars on their faces for the rest of their lives. These marks became silent witnesses of the epidemic, physical memories of a disease that had swept through the empire. In markets, streets, and public gatherings, it became possible to recognize survivors by the scars left behind. The pandemic was no longer an invisible threat. It had written its story directly onto human faces. To truly understand pandemics in human history, we must look beyond human society itself. Diseases do not exist only within human populations. They move through entire ecosystems, among animals, environments, and human communities. Modern science uses the term zoonotic disease to describe illnesses that originate in animals before crossing into human populations. Today, many of the world's most dangerous pathogens are known to have begun this way. Long before the Roman Empire existed, nature had already been experimenting with these invisible biological exchanges. In the ancient world, humans lived much closer to animals than most people do today. Roman farms depended on cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and poultry for survival. Markets in large cities brought live animals together from different regions, often keeping them in crowded conditions where disease could easily spread. Livestock were transported along trade routes, sometimes traveling hundreds or even thousands of kilometers before reaching their destination. Each movement created new opportunities for pathogens to jump between species. Animals also played an important role in Roman warfare. Horses carried cavalry units into battle. Mules and oxen transported military supplies, and animals were present in almost every Roman military camp. Soldiers and animals lived in close proximity for long periods of time, sharing water sources, food storage areas, and living spaces. In such environments, microbes could easily move between species, sometimes evolving in ways that allowed them to infect humans for the first time. Today, scientists recognize that many of history's major pandemics have animal origins. Influenza, plague, and numerous viral diseases began within animal populations before crossing into humans. Although the exact origins of the Antonine Plague remain uncertain, some researchers believe it may represent one of the earliest examples of a zoonotic pandemic recorded in historical texts. If true, the story of this epidemic is not only about Rome, it is about the deep biological connections between humans, animals, and the ecosystems they share. The Antonine Plague did more than take lives. It struck at the very foundations of Roman power. As soldiers fell ill and died, legions that once marched across continents found themselves weakened and depleted. The empire's military might, its greatest guarantee of security and expansion, began to falter. Frontier regions, once tightly controlled, experienced gaps in defense, leaving cities and provinces vulnerable to external threats. Production and trade were equally affected. Farms could not sustain themselves without sufficient labor, and supply chains were disrupted as merchants, craftsmen, and transporters succumbed to illness. Cities that once thrived on commerce and population density saw streets emptying, markets quieting, and warehouses standing unused. The economic engine of Rome, a complex web of trade, taxation, and labor, began to slow, creating a ripple effect felt across the empire. Some historians argue that the Antonine Plague marks more than a temporary crisis. It may represent the beginning of a long decline. The empire that once seemed invincible began to reveal vulnerabilities that would echo for centuries. While Rome would survive for over 2 more centuries, its strength, cohesion, and capacity for expansion had been permanently altered by a microscopic enemy. A disease invisible to the eye had subtly shifted the trajectory of history. When fear sweeps through a population, reason often takes a back seat. In the midst of the Antonine Plague, Roman citizens turned to the spiritual and the supernatural to seek protection and understanding. Temples were filled with offerings and sacrifices to gods who might spare them from illness. Priests and oracles were consulted, rituals performed, and prophecies sought in desperate attempts to explain the invisible threat that medicine could not yet comprehend. People also sought personal protection in more tangible forms. Archaeologists today uncover amulets, charms, and talismans buried with the dead or hidden in homes. These small objects were believed to ward off disease, reflecting a human desire to exert control over an uncontrollable force. Even in a society as advanced as Rome, when faced with an invisible enemy, superstition and ritual became a vital part of coping. The psychological impact of the pandemic extended beyond fear and superstition. Communities were traumatized by widespread death, isolation, and the sudden disappearance of friends, neighbors, and family members. Anxiety, grief, and uncertainty dominated daily life, leaving marks on the collective consciousness of the Roman people. In this way, the Antonine Plague was not only a biological catastrophe, but also a profound social and psychological event. The Antonine Plague lingered for nearly 15 years, reaching its final waves around 180 CE. By the time the epidemic faded, the Roman Empire had been profoundly changed. Population estimates suggest that millions of people perished, leaving towns and rural regions depopulated and altering the demographic landscape of the empire. This loss of human life was not merely a statistic. It reshaped communities, labor forces, and family structures in ways that would echo for generations. Economically, the empire slowed. Agricultural production declined as farms lost workers and livestock. Trade diminished as markets struggled, and urban centers that had been bustling with activity experienced stagnation. The flow of goods, money, and resources that had once fueled Rome's power became disrupted, weakening the empire's ability to respond to new challenges and maintain its former dominance. Militarily, the empire could no longer project the same strength. Legions, once feared across continents, had been reduced in number and effectiveness. Border regions were less secure, making the empire more vulnerable to external invasions. Politically and socially, the cohesion of Rome was shaken. The invisible enemy had exposed vulnerabilities that even the greatest empire of its time could not easily recover from. The long shadow of the Antonine Plague stretched far beyond the final death it caused. It altered the trajectory of the Roman Empire, weakened institutions, and left a lasting imprint on history. Rome would endure for centuries to come, but the world it had once dominated would never be the same again. The story of the Antonine Plague is more than history. It is a mirror reflecting the vulnerabilities of human civilization. Even in an empire as vast and organized as Rome, the combination of dense populations, extensive trade networks, and close interactions with animals created the perfect conditions for a disease to spread across continents. In many ways, the world of 165 CE was the first lesson in globalization and in how viruses can exploit human connectivity. The epidemic also reminds us that humans have always shared ecosystems with animals, and that pathogens do not respect species boundaries. From farm animals to markets, trade caravans, and even military horses, the movement of living creatures has historically provided pathways for diseases to cross into human populations. Zoonotic transmission, once an invisible risk, has shaped history, demonstrating that our fates are intertwined with the natural world in ways we are only beginning to fully understand. History teaches us that pandemics are not a modern phenomenon. From the Antonine Plague to the Black Death, influenza outbreaks, and even today's COVID-19, humanity has repeatedly confronted microscopic enemies that reshape societies, economies, and political landscapes. By studying these events, we can better understand the patterns, vulnerabilities, and strategies that define our collective resilience. Finally, the Antonine Plague reminds us that knowledge, observation, and preparedness are humanity's greatest tools against the invisible. The virus that once silently traversed the Roman Empire may seem distant, yet its lessons echo in every modern city, laboratory, and hospital. From ancient epidemics to contemporary pandemics, human history is intertwined with the struggle against unseen enemies. And the better we understand our past, the stronger we become in facing the future. Empires rise with armies, grand architecture, and intricate governance, but sometimes they fall to something invisible. The Antonine Plague reminds us that no matter how advanced a civilization becomes, microscopic pathogens can alter the course of history. What once devastated the Roman Empire now serves as a lesson for all humanity, a warning etched into the chronicles of time. Even the greatest power cannot escape nature's smallest agents. Today, smallpox, the disease most historians believe caused the Antonine Plague, has been eradicated through one of humanity's greatest medical achievements: global vaccination. The last naturally occurring case was reported in 1977, and since then, coordinated international efforts have prevented its return. Modern medicine has transformed a once deadly, invisible enemy into a vanquished foe, demonstrating the power of observation, science, and collaboration across nations. Even though smallpox has been eradicated, the legacy of zoonotic diseases continues. Scientists remain vigilant against pathogens that jump from animals to humans, developing vaccines, antiviral drugs, and surveillance systems to prevent future pandemics. What history teaches us is clear. The invisible enemies of the past have shaped our knowledge, our science, and our preparedness. Every pandemic, from the Antonine Plague to COVID-19, carries lessons in vigilance, resilience, and humanity's capacity to respond to the unseen. As we reflect on the Antonine Plague, we see that human ingenuity and compassion are our greatest defenses. Observation, knowledge, and scientific advancement have transformed the invisible into the manageable. Yet the story remains a warning that no empire, no matter how mighty, is immune to the microscopic forces of nature. Our challenge today is to honor these lessons, ensuring that history's shadows guide our vigilance and protect future generations. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history, exploring the rise and fall of empires and the invisible forces that shaped our world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll uncover another fascinating chapter of human history and the remarkable stories that have shaped civilizations. Until then, Take care of yourself and your loved ones. May your days be healthy, curious, and full of discovery.